Welcome to episode 55 Successful Domain Champions Analyze the Card Pack Guys with more newly released cards. We have DJ Psych Mike in the house. Right, we are gonna do a comprehensive analysis, theoretical breakdown of DJ Fenris. So be prepared, this theoretical section is gonna be longer than usual. Right. DJ Fenris is basically Rebirth 2.0, a very exciting card that was first released along with the spoiler that Reign and Reverie was going to be a big box. Now, it shares a lot of similarities with Rebirth, that being that they are both runner cards that cost 1 neutral influence. And it allows you to manipulate your identity, but you can only include 1 copy of each in your deck. Yes, that's right, you can actually run both in the same deck, because they both serve different purposes. Even though they both manipulate your identity, DJ Fenris is more expensive and is trashable. I mean, you can't normally trash it as the corp, but it is a resource. So if you are tagged, or if the corp is running cards like voter intimidation or something like something that trashes connections, for example, DJ Fenris is very much vulnerable. As such, you can deactivate it in a way that you can't do with Rebirth. It also grants you 2 identities instead of 1, while with Rebirth, you are swapping out your old identity. With DJ Fenris, you actually keep your old identity. The new identity is instead hosted on DJ Fenris, DJ just acting as a proxy for the new ID. So basically, you can have 2 ID effects in place simultaneously, which seems like a very powerful ability, and yes, it can be. Unfortunately, there are a couple of restrictions. Firstly, it has to be of a different faction. While Rebirth allows you to swap with another same faction ID, DJ Fenris mandates that it's from a different faction, and it must have the Gmod subtype, so that immediately narrows down a lot of possible selections. Now, there's some good news to this though. While Rebirth is a completely useless card in the mini factions because, well, you can't really Rebirth into anything else. The mini factions are unique in their own mini faction. With DJ Fenris, the mini factions actually have access to the most possible Rebirth targets, because all the Gmods are all Anarch, Criminal, and or Shaper. So yeah, Adam and Sunny are gonna be very, very happy to have this 1 influence gem in as a possible thing to splash. I'm sorry, Apex, but this is a resource, it's a connection. You're not gonna have any luck here. Also, because DJ Fenris triggers the identity hosting when it is installed, even a simulator simulating the DJ Fenris isn't gonna help you here. Oh well, I guess Apex never gets any love and never will. But mini factions aside, let's move on to all the possible DJ Fenris targets, the Gmods. Up to Reign and Reverie, we have 11 of these, not counting rotated stuff. It's a pretty wide selection and represents all the factions pretty well, 3 or 4 identities from each faction. So I think it is a good time to start breaking them down into various groups. I've come up with 5 groups, which you can classify them based on how well they work with DJ Fenris. The first group of Gmods are the subpar ones, identities that just aren't really worth rebirthing into, because there are better non-DJ Fenris normal cards out there in the card pool. Chaos Theory, for example, is a very pricey 3 credits for a lone 1 memory. You know, a lot of consoles can provide 1 memory for cheaper, and a lot of hardware just give you that extra memory without having to pay so much, or with a better effect. As for lows, 2 credits per turn seems really good, and it is. However, there's a reason why it's not competitively viable. You don't see it running around a lot in the meta, and that's simply because it's just not likely to pay out against the low ice corporations, right? We are thinking of acid spam decks, CTM decks, potato decks maybe, you know, all these decks that don't really rely a lot on ice. Even Titan, those fast decks that win before you can even force them to rest a couple of ice, those your DJ Fenris into lows is simply not going to pay out. So I would not expect anyone to rebirth into either of these 2 identities. Lows may be situational if you're going up against an ice heavy deck, but yeah, it's a very tenuous call. There are better targets out there. Well, this is not a better target. This is the second category, and only Smoke lies here, for the simple fact that she's a Nonbo with DJ Fenris. The main attraction attracting point of Smoke is obviously the fact that her recurring credit is Stealth, and therefore you can power Stealth Breakers with it. Unfortunately, the subtype Stealth does not carry over when you hold Smoke on DJ Fenris. So basically all you're getting is a recurring credit a turn, at which point you're better off playing Data Folding. The third group of Gmods are those that require your deck to be built around them in the first place. While these are strong targets in their own right and competitively viable in the sense that you see these identities at the top levels of play, you have to keep in mind that these identities are decks that top level players start off with. They start with the identity in mind and then build the deck around it. If you're playing any old deck, any normal deck out there, chances are you will not want to rebirth into one of these IDs because they have some serious limitations that make their sheer efficiency and competitiveness vanish. Laser Talking Thunder, for example, requires you to either have persistent tag removal in your deck or have a plan to go tag me, both of which are tall asks for normal decks because typical decks usually run a lot of fair number of resources which are invalidated once you start taking tags, and yeah, most decks don't run persistent tag clearing cards like Citadel Sanctuary. So Laser Talking Thunder is not the best DJ Fenris target, even though the card draw is very appealing. Same thing with Max, very appealing card draw, clickless card draw effect, but most non-Anarch decks simply cannot handle having 2 cards milled per turn. You're running these cards in your deck for a reason. You want them in your stack, not in your bin. Maybe if you're running either Clone Chip or Levy AR Lab Access as your restricted card, you might find a reason to DJ Fenris into Max. But I find that highly tenuous. Finally, Carbonessa Wu is one of those identities that is strong only if you build around her ID ability. I'm thinking of playing cards like Game Day, cards like Au Revoir or Origami, cards that you would never see played outside of Carbonessa Wu. So there's very little reason to rebirth into her, not to mention that you need some way to circumvent her downside of removing your programs from the game. Typically this means running either self-modifying core or scavenge, which most decks don't have. Especially if you're a non-shaper deck, don't forget, you can only DJ Fenris into Carbonessa Wu if you're a non-shaper to begin with. So are you splashing these shaper cards? If not, you probably won't make very good use of Carbonessa. So to summarize, these IDs are powerful, these IDs are strong, but you need to start off as them and you need to build your deck around them, otherwise they're just not good DJ Fenris targets. You'll be better off using DJ Fenris for the fourth group of runners, which is the situational Gmods. Now these two are valid Gmod choices that I probably wouldn't fault you for if you chose them as your DJ Fenris targets. Quetzal is a situational card that ID. You wouldn't want to start with Quetzal typically because you won't be sure how many barriers you're going to run into. But if you happen to be facing against a barrier heavy deck, especially barriers which just hard end the run, I'm thinking of the Wayland faction here, DJ Fenris Quetzal is not the worst choice at all, especially if those barriers are single subroutine. Seder Adaptive Barrier is probably the one that comes to mind the most because it's typically very high strength, so it might be very expensive to break with traditional barrier breakers like Paperclip. If you rebuff into Quetzal, your DJ Fenris might just pay off very very quickly as you break Seder Adaptive Barriers for free every turn. It's additionally also very good against Scorpios because Quetzal acts as an additional barrier breaker available to you. Sure, it's vulnerable to Hunter Seeker, but that's one more thing that the Corp has to Hunter Seeker, and that's one less program that's going out of the game. So very good against Scorpios. Moving on to Steve Cambridge. Very plain ID, but very definitely useful in a pinch. In certain, it really depends on the game state, but sometimes you just need to recur a certain card that you have 2 copies of in your bin for some reason. Maybe you need the final run event to push for the win. Maybe you need to recur a Stim Hack because your opponent is threatening game point or so on. So if you need that immediate recursion, Steve Cambridge is there to help you. And if you're not criminal because you're running DJ Fenris into Steve, most likely HQ is under defended, so it should not be too difficult to trigger Steve's ability. Most importantly, John Oxford is really really good against Potatoes Unleash. I think I've demonstrated this in a video some time ago, but basically Against Potatoes Unleashed, you're able to run HQ and refill your hand with cards from your bin, which effectively adds additional hit points, making it harder and harder for you to deck out, for your opponent to deck you out, because that's typically what Potatoes tends to do. So against certain matchups, Quetzal and or Steve Cambridge may be good options to consider. However, if you are building a DJ Fenris deck yourself, if you are thinking of slotting him into your deck in the first place, what you really want are to synergize with this final group of Gmods, those that add a lot of value to existing archetypes. First, we start off with, well, there's actually one of each faction. We'll start off with the Anarch one. Reina Roja is a powerful identity ability. You might not see it every day in competitive play, but that's because she's mostly overshadowed by Valencia. However, as a DJ Fenris target, she is definitely under contention, because she is basically a Xanadu that only costs 1 influence. And it also stacks with Xanadu, so if you're playing these two cards in tandem, you can create a very powerful credit denial deck. And what better faction to do it out of than Criminal? Now, one of Criminal's biggest problems with credit denial is that you don't have access to Reina Roja's ability. You're not Anarch, but with DJ Fenris, you now can. Combine Reina Roja with cards like Diversion of Funds, Emergency Shutdown, Rubicon Switch, Maxwell James, all in faction. You have a very powerful credit denial deck. Right? But we're not going to showcase that today. Instead, we're going to go more conventional. We're going to show off the Shaper and Criminal side of things. Hayley is a very powerful Gmod to morph into, or not say morph into, to have by your side, as she allows you to save potentially a click every turn. While you kind of have to build around her, most decks actually run a lot of resources, so that kind of takes care of itself. And if you're playing a good deck, it has a strong draw engine to begin with anyway. So DJ Fenris into Hayley, always a decent choice, especially if it's still early on in the game. As for Armand Geist, this one requires more building around. You need trash cans to get Armand Geist to work. So you might be asking yourself, is there going to be a non-criminal deck out there that has lots of trash cans? I think you do know that, right? We are going to play Geist with Gabali and Kongamato, but we are going to change the ID into Hayley, right? You might remember this Geist deck. It was my successful demo number 50 for Diversion of Funds. We played Gabali, Kongamato, and Grappling Hook as the breakers, but that was out of Criminal. We are now going to play it out of Shaper. So we have to strip all the Criminal cards. We are going to lose Corporate Grunt. We're going to lose Diversion of Funds. We're going to lose Expose and Ormakua. But we get to gain some really cool stuff. We gain a Pirate Hat because we are Pirate Hayley. That's right. Most of you probably have seen this deck in action already. In fact, it was first pioneered, or rather popularized, by Nehemiah. And I heard he's a pretty good player, so this must be a good deck. You notice that this deck still maintains the number of healthy number of trash cans, just like the Geist version. But even though it loses some powerful Criminal cards, it gains some powerful Shaper cards in exchange. Beth Kurain Chang, very powerful latent economy. You also get Diesel, which is pretty good draw, and you have somewhat decent breakers in Savant, which can help you break ice without having to pump strength. So yeah, we're just gonna slot in DJ Fenris into this deck, and our idea is to DJ Fenris into Geist most of the time. Get the best of both worlds. You get the card draw from Geist, and you get the clickless install from Hayley. They synergize very well hand in hand, and this deck has enough trash cans to fuel Geist. So that's the dream. You have a very strong latent engine with the IDs, and you have a very strong breaker suite because Kongamato and Gabali and Hook are all very good breakers. Right. We don't have spy cameras, so that's a lot of trash cans gone, but because we're Shaper, did I say we are crap? We are Shaper. We get access to deep data mining instead, which is a very powerful R&D digging card. And since we are showcasing Rain and Reverie, I totally can't resist showing off a card that synergizes very well with multi-access and R&D. That's Psych Mike. That's the second card we're going to be looking at today. Psych Mike is a conditional card that requires strong multi-access. You're not playing this in a deck that has no way to access multiple cards from R&D. And this is why I wanted to put it here. We are already playing Deep Data Mining as one of our strong win condition cards. Why not play the Rain and Reverie card that synergizes well with it? It pays us for making Deep Data Mining runs, as if we are not already getting paid by our tech traders to break ice. So oftentimes we will end up richer than we started the run off, which is really, really cool. Outside of that though, Psych Mike tends to be a Temujin light. One of the things that Temujin used to do, Temujin contract, was that it subsidized, in the mid to late game, it made runs cheaper, right? You had all these taxing eyes like Fetch Out 3 and DNA Tracker, but if you run on a Temujin server, you are getting 4 credits back every successful run. So basically, that server becomes 4 credits cheaper to run. It's as though you're running that server with 4 bad publicity. And Psych Mike kind of does the same thing. If you run R&D, you'll get at least 1 credit rebate, because you are going to access at least 1 card. So that's what Psych Mike does. It makes your R&D runs cheaper. It's like having additional bad pub to use only on R&D once per turn. Now, the biggest problem with Psych Mike isn't the fact that it's tied to multi-access, rather it's the fact that it's in the wrong faction. At 4 influence and a Shaper card, it's a bit unfortunate because you would want to play Psych Mike in a deck that runs a lot. I'm thinking something like a Mining Accident Anarch. Well, you can't, because 4 influence is way too much to pay for an economy card that doesn't, exactly pay out tons. So, yeah, unfortunately, all the good run-based economy cards like Bankroll, your Paragon, your Mining Accidents, and your Virus breakers like Yusuf and Musashi, they are all in the wrong faction. So you're either forced to import Psych Mike, which you're not going to do, or you're forced to import those cards into Shaper, which is also a pretty tough call. So yeah, without that much run-based synergy, we are kind of just stuck using Psych Mike only as a deep data mining rewarder. So that's the deck that we are going to play. Let's see how we fare. Today we are up against Titan Transnational, and this is where I regret my life choices. I wish I kept the Clot in my deck. Well, that wasn't a very good idea to play Clot in a deck without Sacrificial Construct anyway. So instead I swapped out the Clot for a turntable, one-off turntable. Because it appeared in my opening hand and reminded me that that was the best answer against Atlas with counters, I decided to keep my opening hand. Usually you would mulligan, hard mulligan for Tech Trader, because that's a very key economy card, but against such a fast corp, we probably need the auspices of Turntable to save us. Right, so we're going to use our Hayley ability right off the bat to get a free install of Peddler, which shows us a Grappling Hook and a Laguna Velasco. So a no-brainer there. We definitely want the Laguna Velasco, as that speeds things up by a lot. The bonus is that it also threatens Clot, as we see our opponent attempting to fast advance a Project Atlas out here on turn 2. It's not the most uncommon thing. I'm actually quite happy to see this, because if it turns out to be an Audacity fast advance and they sacrifice a Hostile Takeover or a Global Food Initiative in their hand to do so, they're gonna be pretty sad. Right, let's just put it that way. With the turntable in my hand ready to go, I can definitely punish them for trashing their entire HQ. So now they're gonna Atlas fast advance here. Curiously enough, very curiously, it's not an Audacity. It's a Biotic Labor. They spend 4 whole influence to import Biotic Labor. So very interesting. It puts them on 0 credits, which means that the R&D ice is irrelevant. So I immediately head to Turntable Town here, running HQ twice and running R&D once. And if I plink off any agendas here, it will immediately get swapped with the Project Atlas. But I come up short. Instead, I see a Musvingo, a preemptive action, and a Morsolus. So, entire turn wasted there. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to capitalize off this stealing window. Didn't manage to hit any agendas. So it's back to business. What are we going to do here? HQ is probably free of agendas. What about R&D? Well, we are going to check it out. We are going to deep data mine here and make sure that we can break the ice on it with Kongamato and or Gabali. With only 3 credits, there's very little ice my opponent can threaten that has more than 2 subroutines. So we are making it through, and we're going to spend all our money to see 5 cards. One of which is a Hostile Takeover that my opponent immediately loses. We also see best defense and Ho'em, so good to know what my opponent is on, but that was huge. I can't stress enough how big that was. Not only does my opponent lose an agenda point, but they also lose an Atlas and an Atlas token. So scoring out for my opponent is going to be a lot harder given this state. Right, just a reminder for newer players out there, the Corp cannot use the Atlas counter in my score area. They can only use abilities on their agendas when it's in their own score area. Right, so I've got my Laguna down. Because I was able to defuse the threat of an Atlas token on my opponent's side, I'm now able to spend the next few turns setting up my economy and set up my Laguna Velasco draw. The daily cast ticking down has given me good economy, allowing me to actually drop the Velasco because I spent quite a lot of money installing the turntable, and I spent a lot of turns making runs, which is turns not spent on setting up. So for those of you unaware, my opponent's on a fast advance Titan deck, which relies very heavily on scoring Atlases and then scoring the next Atlas using an Atlas counter. You typically only need 2 cards to fast advance, a Project Atlas and a fast advance card. As you saw, my opponent was running Biotic Labor, but it could easily be Audacity, it could easily be Reconstruction Contract. Right, we finally find our economy. We are going to drop all of them on the table at once, 2 tech traders and a daily cast. So this should provide me with enough money for the rest of the game. As I start using my trash can abilities, I should be making more money than I spend installing said trash cans, and that's when things are going to go very well. Now my opponent's not making a remote, so I don't actually have to prepare my breakers anytime soon. I do have them. I have a deck deer into self-modifying code for a grappling hook, but it seems like my opponent is just drawing a bunch of cards. It seems like a very heavy into fast advance and comboing out. So I'm just going to take my time here to draw into, or rather dig for, my deep data minings. I have expended 1, there are 2 left in my deck. Once I find the deep data mining, I'm going to slap down the Psych Mike and hit for R&D. That is my game plan. Right? So you notice that my opponent did something really smart on that turn, and that was they double advance, they single advance the Masvingo, which already had 1 advancement token on it. So now I cannot break the R&D Masvingo using just my installed Gabali alone. I need either a grappling hook or a Kongamato to get past that. So it's starting to get really annoying because deep data mining is my main way of winning against fast advance, but if there's going to be a Masvingo on R&D, it's going to be pretty annoying to break. As my opponent finds more and more ice to stack on R&D, it's starting to look like I need to start hammering R&D quickly. Now I draw into my breakers, a Kongamato here, a grappling hook there, but no deep data mining, so I don't actually have incentive to run R&D just yet. What a pity. Instead, I'm going to use Hayley's ability to drop DJ Fenris on the table. Now, DJ Fenris, a very interesting choice here. As I said, the default choice is always Armand Geist due to the number of trash cans I have in my deck. But remember what I said about the situational IDs, right? We are up against Wayland. We are up against a Masvingo deck. I think there is a very strong case for Rebirth, DJ Fenris into Quetzal here, right? Quetzal means that to break a multi-subroutine Masvingo, let's say 3 or more subroutines, instead of using a grappling hook and a Kongamato or Gabali, we use a grappling hook and Quetzal instead. This saves us one of our snakes or one of our alligators for something better. So this was the motivation behind my Rebirth into... I keep saying Rebirth. Rebirth 2.0 into Quetzal. It's not like I'm going to miss the card draw, right? I have Laguna Velasco installed, and I have Beth ticking for me. Every single turn I'm getting a free card because my opponent's on 10 credits. So card draw's not going to be a problem, I think. The real problem is breaking Masvingos and getting into R&D, which has an upgrade on it. There's an upgrade on R&D now, and I think it might be Crisium Grid. It's in faction after all. It's very rare to see Titan decks run Crisium Grid because they tend to win very quickly before they need to defend the servers, but just in case that's a Crisium Grid, we are gonna run R&D. Of course, we drop Psych Mike first because we want to get as many credits out of Psych Mike as possible, so we run R&D and we see Morcelus into Masvingo. 3 subroutines followed by 2 subroutines. I can get the grappling hook here. The question is, do I use the grappling hook on Masvingo or Morcelus? So Masvingo can easily be broken with Quetzal's ability, that's for sure. I have 1 Kongamato and 1 Gabali, so either of those will settle the Masvingo. This means I can use my grappling hook for Morcelus, which I do. Now, Morceless has a very inconsequential subroutine. The gain 1 credit subroutine is something that I can definitely afford to fire. But I choose to break it with Congamato because I wanted to trigger tech traders. Then I break Masvingo with Gabali and Quetzal, and I see the Chrysium Grid on R&D, which I trash. This is why I wanted to use all my breakers. I needed the money from tech traders to trash the Chrysium Grid. So by doing that, I get 2 credits of Psych Mike. I'm not sure if it was implemented correctly. I believe I'm supposed to get 2 credits, 1 for accessing the R&D card, 1 for accessing the Chrysium Grid. But I think I only got 1 credit in JNet. Not that it really matters anyway, as my opponent isn't gonna land a hard-hitting news on me. That's a card that might come out of Wayland, but I do have misdirection in my hand to prepare for that. Now with the Chrysium Grid out of the way, we can now play the deep data mining from our hand. All I need to do is install the grappling hook and maybe 1 more of either Kongamata or Gabali. So I'm trying to dig for that now. Don't really find it, but I get economy instead. I guess we take that and discard the duplicate Psych Mike. Another detail about Psych Mike, it's a unique card, so it doesn't stack with itself. Multiple copies are useless, so you don't really want to run 3 copies of it. I think 2 is a fair amount, or maybe even 1 if you're not really relying on it. Now our opponent shows us even more influence. 3 influence spent on a Trick of Light. They finally found their combo. That's why they were advancing the Masvingo on R&D. They wanted Trick of Light counters. So my opponent now has a Project Atlas and a token, so it's time for us to start pressuring. We are going to get our breakers down. Grappling hook goes on the table. And we are not going to fire Hayley here, but we are going to fire a deep data mining into their face. Now, if my opponent's smart here, they would use the Atlas counter to tutor for something. And if they do, that means that if I steal any agendas, the Atlas counter won't be for nothing. But it means that whatever they tutor for will go into their hand, and that if I run HQ with my subsequent clicks, I could potentially snag it from their hand. So nothing safe for my opponent, as I break the Morceless with grappling hook, allowing the first subroutine to fire. Then I install Gabali on the Street Peddler, followed by Quetzal to break the 2 advancement Masvingo. Because my opponent used Trick of Light, I was able to break Masvingo using just Gabali and Quetzal without needing a grappling hook. Now I access 5 cards with deep data mining, and of course I see an agenda in global food. Not gonna swap it because it's worth more points for my opponent. In fact, I find 2 global food, so now suddenly I'm at match point. Before accessing, my opponent made the smart move to use Atlas token for a 3rd Project Atlas, which is now in their hand, which I should try to steal now. The question is, do I drop the Savant before running, or do I just run in fearlessly twice? Running in fearlessly is a problem if they have a stopper ice on HQ. Ho'em comes to mind. I don't have any breakers at all. I'm not too worried about net damage ice, even though I only have 3 cards in hand. Wayland doesn't threaten anything particularly nasty, and Shiashi's off the table since they're only on 7 credits. So fearlessly, I decide to run HQ here without installing the Savant, because if it's an irrelevant ice, I can potentially make 2 runs and have a good shot of winning outright. So my opponent's forced to rest the ice here. That's the other thing. I wanted to induce them to rest this ice, so that if they rest the ice and score the Atlas this coming turn, they'll be dirt poor. Turns out it's a Morceless, so we are gonna suffer the Morceless effect. The most consequential effect is actually taking a tag. I'm not too happy about the tag. This means that I might be liable to get boomed or high profile targeted. And that's a very cheesy way to lose for someone who is up 6 points to 3. So I decided to be a good boy and clear my tag diligently. Don't want to lose to a cheesy high profile target there by running HQ twice. And I paid for it as my opponent audacities their way into 5 points and an Atlas counter. So now I basically have to check archives to make sure they're not hoarding extra agendas. They're not. So all the agendas are in R&D. There's nothing in their hand, there's nothing in the bin, they're all in R&D. Right, time to go for it. But I have no breakers, so let's find our breakers. Not running NT is coming to hurt me here. I dropped the NT due to card slots, but yeah, I would like something to break that Masvingo with right now. Right, so I'm slowly trying to assemble my cards. I know that there's 1 deep data mining unaccounted for. I'm running all 3 copies, so there's 1 left in my deck. Alright, I can reliably draw into it with only 4 cards left in my deck. Or I could levy with the same old thing that is on my table right now. and try to get a second go at my deck where I'll have more breakers to use and perhaps even draw into the deep data mining here. So very tricky decision. First, I'm going to drop the Savant. This is going to be my main breaker against Morcelus. Now that I've earned lots of money from my tech traders and my Psych Mike, which worked with the deep data mining just now, I am able to establish a good amount of money to break ice with Savant. Now I levy into a deep data mining, so very fortunate for me there, along with some other breakers like Hook and Gabali, so I can guarantee myself entry into R&D next turn. You'll notice that because my opponent spent all their resources advancing the Masvingo, it means that I actually need to use Grappling Hook. It's my only answer against Masvingo. And you'll notice that my opponent would probably win by this point, as a regular Titan deck would, by tutoring for their last Atlas, using that Atlas token and fast advancing. However, because all 3 Atlases are gone, because there's 1 in my score area, they can't do that. They do not have any 3-2 agendas remaining. Because of that, my opponent was forced to click for credits last turn, which meant that I can now go in for deep data mining, using Grappling Hook to break Masvingo, and then breaking Morcelus with Savant. Right, I'm gonna use Quetzal's ability here. Quetzal coming into play. DJ Fenris playing the oomph music and pumping it out, amping my R&D pressure all the way up to 11. We are not gonna see 11 cards here, but hopefully we see enough cards to find us one agenda. One agenda is all it takes for us to win because we have turntable. So even a standoff would win us the game at this point. Now my opponent has a pretty big decision here. Do they use the Atlas counter? Obviously the answer is no, because we are both looking to win the game, right? With that, my opponent's looking to win the game with the Atlas counter. So if I hit anything off R&D, I'm gonna win the game regardless. The Atlas, being able to swap for the Atlas counter is redundant because I already won the game, so they don't have to worry about losing the Atlas counter. They are more worried about losing the game. So it might be a good decision for them to use the Atlas counter to lower the R&D agenda density by bringing an agenda into hand, but given that I had 2 clicks remaining and could easily break their HQ Morcelus with my Savant, it wasn't a good idea, so they let it be, which was the correct choice, and I won off R&D by stealing the 3rd global food. There were many key decisions this game, one of which was the choice to rebirth between, DJ Fenris between Quetzal and Geist. Even in retrospect, I still can't definitively call it one way or another. I think my Quetzal choice was correct. I wouldn't bet money on it. One of the big reasons why is because the way I constructed the deck was such that there was no proper barrier breaker. The original Pirate Hayley ran Inti, but we've dropped it in this deck. So basically we are not getting past Masvingos without Kongamatos and Gubalis and grappling hooks, which are in limited supply. Hence, having Quetzal to aid in barrier breaking was definitely well worth the 1 click and 3 credit investment for installing DJ Fenris. Don't forget, you break stuff for free, so without it's just a one-time investment. After that, no need to worry about clicks to install breakers or credits to use breakers. Quetzal is completely free, so it's a lot of value for money. The argument for Geist would be that because you draw through your deck faster, you get to see more Kongamatos and Gubalis due to the passive draw. And by using said Kongamatos and Gubalis, you draw into even more of your deck, so your deck fuels itself faster. Because I didn't try Geist, I did not get to see how fast this was and whether it was able to compensate the fact that Quetzal helped me break barriers 3 times. That's 3 Kongamatos / Gubalis that I needed to compensate for. Now what about Psych Mike? Well, I didn't make a lot of runs this game, but every run I made was very impactful. After installing the Psych Mike, I made 2 deep data mining runs and 1 run on R&D for a single axis, but with a Chrysium grid on it as well. So Psych Mike earned 12 credits this entire game, except that it didn't, because my final deep data mining won me the game. Essentially, Psych Mike only gave me 7 usable credits, minus 1 install cost. That's a net gain of 6. That's good. That's more than a show gamble, more than daily cost. But those credits came at a not very useful time. Pirate Hayley doesn't really need the late game credits because tech traders will fuel you for eternity. What you really badly need is to have money in your bank early, to play cards like Laguna Velasco District, which is expensive, and to get your first Gabalis and hooks on the table. And Psych Mike doesn't really help with that. I guess it kind of helps with the first deep data mining, but as you saw, after playing my first deep data mining, I was down to 0 credits, and I didn't have the Psych Mike on the table. This is why most Pirate Hayley decks prefer burst economy, cards like Peace in Our Time, which is more reliable in its payout. And well, it does give the corp a bit of money, which is a problem, but it also allows you to stave off threats like hard-hitting news, which Psych Mike can't really help defend against early on. So yeah, Peace in Our Time is just a much better setup card, which is exactly what you need because you cannot afford to click for credits early on in the game. Every click you spend clicking for credits is a turn your opponent is spending advancing agendas and winning the game more quickly than you are. And yeah, the Pirate Hayley deck is just very poor before you get your second tech trader up. So I can definitely see why you would want Peace in Our Time over Psych Mike, but do keep in mind that Peace in Our Time is also a neutral card with influence, so you might just want Psych Mike simply for the fact that it doesn't cost influence, so you can spend influence on valuable cards like Turntable that single-handedly win you certain matchups like this one. Alright, let's finish this off by talking about our usual combos and Nonbos. Combos. Well, if you're not going to play run events for multi-access with Psych Mike, the next best thing you can do is to play Nyashia. This is a very reliable long-term multi-access card that seems to be built, seems to be what the designers had in mind when they designed Psych Mike. Right? So they both fuel each other. Nyashia gives you more payout for Psych Mike, and Psych Mike gives you money that you can use to run R&D more often, meaning that you trigger Nyashia to its fullest. One of the problems with Nyashia is that to use it fully, to make the most of the 3 power counters, you need to make 3 successful runs with Nyashia installed. That's not an easy task to do. I think as you'll notice when you play games with Shaper, one of the biggest problems with runners in general nowadays is that economy engines are generally very weak, so you cannot afford to make multiple R&D runs early to mid-game. Like, you can't be running every R&D every single turn, you're just gonna bleed money, and that's bad for many reasons. You just simply cannot sustain R&D runs, especially when ice is so taxing nowadays. So Nyashia is not an ideal card when you can be playing something that gives you more accesses with just a single run. Cards like Deep Data Mining and Turning Wheel. So yeah, those cards are generally preferred over Nyashia, but with Psych Mike, Nyashia moves up the power level by 1 notch. Right, let's move on to the Nonbos. Okay, so what Nonbos with Psych Mike? As it turns out, there are lots of things. Firstly, things that appear to give you accesses but don't actually make R&D runs. Psych Mike only triggers when a successful run on R&D ends, and Divide and Conquer doesn't do that. Divide and Conquer is an archives run that ends on archives. While it does give you an access on R&D, it's still a run that ends on archives. So you do not gain money from a Divide and Conquer run, no matter how many cards you access from R&D. Omar does work, however, are you really playing Psych Mike in Omar? I think not. Next up, we have the Mind's Eye. This is a very unfortunate Nonbo in my opinion. While Psych Mike does give you the money you need to make multiple R&D runs to charge up Mind's Eye, your use of Mind's Eye itself, the click ability to access the top card of R&D, is not an R&D run, so it cannot give you extra money from Psych Mike, which is a real pity, because with Mind's Eye you're usually playing it with cards like Nyashia, which gives you more mileage out of accessing cards from R&D. So typically with Mind's Eye you could be accessing 2 or even 3 cards, but you won't be reaping the rewards with Psych Mike. You won't be getting money from doing so. So, you know, it's a partial combo, but it's not a full combo. As such, the combo itself is rather weak. What else doesn't synergize with Psych Mike? Well, things that don't give you extra accesses. One of the most popular means of getting multi-access on R&D is Equivocation. It's a permanent source, it stays on the table forever, and it has infinite charges unlike Nyashia. However, it doesn't give you extra accesses. It simply forces the corp to draw the top card of R&D. So you're still accessing only 1 card, Psych Mike will only pay you 1 credit. All in all, I think Psych Mike is a little tricky in the deck building phase, in the sense that you really have to carefully evaluate whether Psych Mike is truly suitable for your deck. Even though you might be running strong multi-axis like I am here, the money might not come in at a time where you need it the most, and yeah, that tends to be the problem with resource economy that pays out over the long run as opposed to giving you money right now in the early game. DJ Fenris, on the other hand, is a lot more flexible, and I would love to hear what all of you have come up with and experimented with, aside from the very boring and obvious Hayley Geist combo. It's almost like a match made in heaven. Until next time, this is DJ Fenris signing out.